Right. So if you want to know more about what I'm going to talk about, you can find resources online at the ASTR websites. You can find all the church's historical statistics and present statistics, all the statistics ever for every organizational unit at AdventistStatistics.org. And you can also see some analysis of statistics at AdventistResearch.org/blog. So what is our current membership? The latest figures we have are for June 30, 2018. And because it's inapt to compare June 30 with December 31, I'm doing here what I've done for the last 2 years and showing a 6-year trend of what the membership was at as of June 30. I'm not going to dwell on this because we know for various reasons that there are problems with these particular numbers, but the trend we believe is accurate. We're confident in that, and the trend, of course, is really very encouraging. We're very confident in the accuracy of the numbers of accessions, and this shows you a 6-year trend for the accessions as of the end of the year, so for the calendar years 2012 through 2017. This is last year was the 15th year in all and the 13th in succession when more than 1 million accessions were reported to the Seventh-day Adventist Church in the year. It is the figure that we have, the number that united themselves at the Seventh-day Adventist Church last year was 1,352,931. It'll be on a slide in a minute. That is actually slightly down on last year. And of course, ideally one would hope that accessions would increase year on year. And you can see from the slide that there's a little bit of up and down. But actually, if you were to look, you can see that 2014 is a little bit of an outlier, and with that we would see a kind of steady trend line. 2014 had extra growth. You may wonder what happened. Well, it's partly because of membership audits, and I flag that because often we think that membership audits only take members off. But actually they can add members. And if we look at the accessions for last year, we see that of that 1.35 million, overwhelmingly 1.28 million were baptisms. That's no surprise. You can see there, though, that the brown little piece of wedge at the bottom, 27,500 are adjustments. But in 2014, the adjustments are very considerable. And what happens is when you do membership audits, one identifies people who really were baptized, sometimes years ago, but had never somehow crossed our official radar. Indeed, this is a particular issue in those divisions that have mass baptisms with many thousands of people being baptized at one time. They can be lost. So, though we tend to think of audits as being about losses, audits can also lead to gains to the church as well. But typically, yes, audits do result in losses. So this chart shows the losses for 2017, just to compare it with the accessions. You notice it says living losses. Just to be clear, when I talk about losses in this presentation, I'm talking about those who have left the church, not about deaths. I guess in a pure accounting terms, one should include deaths as a gains and losses, but we're not dealing with profits and losses. It's not that kind of accounting. We're dealing with people's souls, and death is at least typically involuntary, whereas leaving the church is not. So you can see last year we recorded losses of over 500,000. Of those, dropped was just under 200,000, but missing is just over 200,000, and the negative adjustments are 160,000. And so, Brother Chairman, I want to highlight to members of the Executive Committee, that means that last year of the people who were registered as leaving the church, 2/3 of them, we didn't know what happened to them. I've said before, and I dare say I'll say again, we will always lose people, but we should at least know what happened to them if we are to emulate the shepherd of Jesus' parable in Luke 15.
Amen.
This gives you a 6-year trend for the losses, and you can see that in 2014, we almost approached the 1 million mark. Looking at it, you may also think, well, they peaked and then they've declined. But I just want to stress to you, we're very confident that it's not the case that there were many more members left the church in 2014 than left the church in 2015. Because just to remind you, this is the fruit of the audit program. And the audits pick up people who left the church sometimes years ago. So this is the year in which the departure is registered. So, to look at it, you'd think maybe we were bottoming out. But really what happened is 2011, 2012, 13, 14, the church was doing audits everywhere. Then 2015, it was the GC session. Accessions were down, so were losses. Audits wasn't what was on many people's minds. But then also leadership changed at divisions, but also at many unions. And so in 2016, you have a leadership group. The impetus of audit has been lost, but also the importance of it has not been recognized. And at the 16 and 17 annual councils, I did encourage and urge audits to be picked up again. And therefore, Brother Chairman, I suppose it's with an odd sense of gratification that I see the numbers taken off have grown this year. Just so nobody misunderstands that, I don't wish to see members leave the church. I would wish that there were 5 who left last year instead of possibly 500,000. But these are people who have already left the church, and we need to be aware of that. We need to be aware of it because, of course, it affects how we will plan as leaders. And losses affect church growth. I'm always puzzled when I hear people talk about church growth as though it and evangelism are synonymous. But church growth is affected by losses. And in this slide, you can see how the annual losses literally undercut the gains made each year. Now, in response to this, one reaction is sometimes to say, well, this doesn't look so good. Let's just not take off the books, the people who have left. And that is a decision that's taken at divisions, it's taken at unions, it's taken at conferences and missions, it's taken at the local church. We are all complicit in it, Brother Chairman. But it is not the way, again, of the divine good shepherd who recognizes that even one of his sheep is missing. 1% of the flock, whereas our losses are somewhat higher than that. Well, how do we know that? I've touched on this before, but not everyone has been to an annual council before. By looking at the mortality rate, we gain an insight. Mortality rate is the number of deaths per 1,000 population. The green is the Adventist population. The green is the general population. The blue, the Adventist. This is the global. Obviously, the picture varies by division, but globally, our mortality rate is 1/3 of general mortality, whereas the Adventist Health Advantage would expect it to be at 2/3 or 3/4. So we know that there are problems with our figures. We need to know this so that we can plan strategically, that we can use resources effectively and be good stewards. But really, in the end, it's not about numbers, it's about people, it's about the souls of people Jesus died to save. And I've shared this graphic before, and I dare say I will again. The graphic doesn't change, the numbers do. We update the figures every year. We now have 53 years of data on accessions and losses. And so we can now say that the number of people who have been members of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, not been interested, but been members since 1965, now exceeds 37 million. Praise God for that. But the number who have left now exceed 14 million. So in the spirit of emulating the divine good shepherd, Brother Chairman, this is an issue we would want to correct. But the church doesn't only suffer losses, praise God, it does have people join the church. And this shows you a 20-year, this was a slide I was going to miss, but with the technical difficulties, they've been included, it seems. So I'm just going to go through these slides very quickly. This shows a 20-year trend of accessions per day. And you can see them rising from 1998. They're a little down last year because the total number of accessions was down. But 2016, it approached 3,600. Last year, it was 3,300 each day. And that means that every 23 seconds in 2017, every 23 seconds someone became a Seventh-day Adventist.
Yes.
What fuels this growth? Brother Chairman, it is church planting, of which my colleague Gary Krause spoke. This gives you the figures for new congregations just in the last 12 months. So again, these are the figures of June 30. And remarkably, actually, exactly 2,500 new congregations were planted in the 12 months through June 30 this year. Almost 2,000 new companies and 500 churches. If we look at a 20-year trend in the number of new congregations, we can see that there was particular spikes in the early 21st century. Things died down, but around 2009 increased and gradually has remained quite high. There is a drop, you can see there's also some fluctuation, some volatility, and in an ideal world, Brother Chairman, we would again hope that these would rise year on year, but nevertheless it is new congregations that fuel church growth. You can see this also in this chart, which shows the 20-year trend of total congregations. And this you can see again, the blue line is the total number of churches, the green line is the total number of companies. And I do apologize that the graphics are a little bit out. It was because we had to switch from one computer system to another, and so these are not perhaps quite as clear as they might have been. But the blue is the churches, the green is the companies. And you can see here very clearly that the growth in number of churches is more rapid, is greater than the growth in the number of companies. Now that is partly because we see companies becoming organized into churches, and we praise God for that spiritual maturity and development. But nevertheless, if growth is to continue, we do also need to see continued growth in the planting of new companies. But if we look at the total number over the last 20 years, you can see the very steady growth, which helps to explain in large part the growth in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. To such an extent that the worldwide ratio for Adventists to the population is now at 361 people for every Seventh-day Adventist globally. As late as 2000, it was over 500 to 1. Now, on a graph, we normally expect to see higher is better, here lower is better, but so we can recalculate this as a different ratio as members per 10,000 people. And so you can see that in 1992, there were only 13 Seventh-day Adventists for every 10,000 people, and over the last 26 years, that has doubled, and again, that is partly due to church planting. But we need to be cognizant of that statistic of members per 10,000 because we are growing, but the world's population is growing. So the concern is, are we growing at the same rate? The ratios show us, in fact, that we are growing well, but we're not growing well everywhere. I'm going to show you now 6 charts on the 1040 window. I just want to make it clear before I start, we are growing in the 1040 window. If you look at net baptisms, accessions, we are growing, and we praise God for that. But how are we doing in comparison to the rest of the world? So here, the blue shows you inside the 1040 window, and green shows you the rest of the world. So what's on the screen now is the number of countries. Here you see the number of ordained Adventist ministers. Here you see the number of churches and companies, the total congregations. Here you see the church membership. And you can see that it's fairly consistent for the Adventist presence. Membership and congregations are about a quarter of that piece of that pie. You'll notice, though, that ordained ministers is less than a quarter. So our members in the 1040 window and the people we're trying to reach don't have as many resources with them. But still, we have a consistent presence of about a quarter. The problem is, Brother Chairman, that if we look at the world population, the proportions are reversed. 33% of the world's population is inside the 1040 window, where we have 75%. And indeed, if we look at the ratio of population to members, you'll see that outside the 1040 window, instead of 360 to 1, it's 142 to 1. But inside the 1040 window, it's 1,685 people for every Seventh-day Adventist. It is worse by a factor of 11. Well, what can change this? What could change this would partly be the world mission offerings. And you see here the world mission offering for 2016. I apologize for the slide. It should just say 2016, not 17 at the end. What I want you to notice here is that the North American division is the large orange. That's 26%. But note that the second largest percentage share is the South American division with 24%, and then the Inter-American division with 15%. Now we'll look at the trend in just briefly in just a minute. But so you can see here how mission offering is coming from a variety of places. But those three divisions, NAD, SAD, IAD, are the only ones where the percentage share is in double digits. But nevertheless, Inter-European division is fourth. And I just want to highlight that the Inter-European division and the Trans-European together have 1.25% of world membership. But they contribute 11.25% of the world mission offering. So they contribute more than their membership by almost a factor of 10. Fifth largest contributor in percentage terms is the South Pacific division, and if we were to take SPD plus the two European divisions, together they have 3.75% of membership, but 17.75% of the mission offering. These, of course, were the old mission homelands. North America, Europe, South Pacific. And we praise God that now the church has gone global. Our members are in many other places, but it's good to see that our members in those territories still have the passion for mission and contribute to the mission offering. Now, I can't show you a good chart that shows a trend in giving, because A, it's affected by inflation, but it's in fact affected by inflation in every country where it's collected, and B, it's affected by currency exchange rates, because it's all collected in local currency and then exchanged once, sometimes twice. What we can show you is the 10-year trend in the percentage of division share. So just to stress again, looking at this, almost all divisions, the mission offering is increased in net terms. There's a couple where it's stagnated, but 10 divisions at least, it has increased. So what we're looking at is just the percentage share. Are you with me on that? So you can see that North American division in 2006 contributed 40% of the mission offering. Inter-American division was second. South American division was actually fourth. But you can see in 2000, that's the blue line. The green is 2011, the white is 2016. And so you can see that shift, huge growth in percentage terms from South America, Inter-America remaining very stable and strong. To look at it another way, this looks at just the top 5 divisions' share of world mission offering. You can see the North American division percentage share coming down. Again, that's not a decline in the offering, it's a decline in the share. The South American rising and European and Inter-American and South Pacific remaining strong. Brother Chairman, what helped this church to grow was that in 1863 we set the pattern that we've followed ever since of being interdependent. We take workers, talented people, we take money, tithes and offerings from where the church is strong, and we place them where the church is weak. And that's how the church has grown. And so these three charts illustrate well, I think, Brother Chairman, how we still do that. How now places that used to just be net recipients of mission are increasing more and more to the mission offering. But we also see a second point, which is that there is still a disproportionate contribution made by the old mission homelands. So those 2 points together highlight the interdependence of the world church. But I'll end with one sobering note. Again, I can't show you a meaningful chart of world mission offering in real terms. What I can show you is the world mission offering as a percent of world tithe. Are you clear what I mean by that? So you can see that once world mission offering amounted to a much higher percentage of world tithe. Indeed, right after World War II, it was over 40% of the tithe. I guess people felt grateful at the end of World War II. But if you look, you'll see all the way through the 60s, it was at, or much of the 60s, it was at 30%, but now it's at 3%. So I come back to my, the talk I gave at the opening of the Lead Conference on Thursday evening. I think we have to pose the question, is the spirit of sacrifice, is the spirit of the sacrifice for mission, is the spirit of commitment to mission, is it there as much as it once was? To conclude, whether we count baptisms and members, whether we count churches and companies, whether we're counting tithes and mission offerings, counting is always a means to an end. It's not an end in itself. Big numbers aren't our goal. Because in the Bible, big numbers aren't always better. God tells Gideon, the people you have with you are too many for me to work my purposes. We count because it can tell us how we're doing in reaching our greater goal. If we use numbers to identify mission trends, it can help us. If we rely on numbers to shore up our identity, it will harm us. In the end, it's not by might, it's not by power, nor, if I may interpolate words into Zechariah's text, is it by numerical strength. It's by God's Spirit. What that means is it's not by my might, nor by our power, it's by God's power invested into us, imbuing us, that we will achieve the mission of the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Thank you so much, Dr. David Trim.